Welcome to Books Boys, live from the Grand Library, the Dean and PJ.
He's PJ.
Hello there.
I'm the Dean, and we are the Books Boys. This is the Books
one and only.
This is the Books Boys show. Get it? Buy it? Books.
Oh, I interrupted you there, Dean.
But it was my fault. I forgot that, you'd think after 22 episodes I'd remember which bit comes in which order, but apparently not.
Well, it's very shocking stuff. And you know what's even more shocking?
What?
So I made my way today to the library in Dresden. So I heard of this place. They call it a Bibliothek. And supposedly it's a place where they keep books.
So you've gotten out of the supermarket, you've gotten out of the toilet paper aisle, and you find somewhere, you've heard a rumor there might be some books in this building you're in.
Yeah, so it's got a building and there are bathrooms. So I've been inside the bathrooms checking out the toilet rolls.
Sure.
But I can't find Shakespeare's complete works of plays. I might have found some P.G. Wodehouse, but I'm not sure. The scripture is a bit.
Well, maybe they're sold out of Shakespeare. Did you find any Plato or anything like that in there?
Well, you see, I didn't find that much at all. I thought it was supposed to be full of these books, but I just found a few handful of toilet papers. No publication dates. It didn't say if it's first edition or third. Made in China. So it seems to be very big into the Chinese authors, postmodern Chinese authors. I think it's a new movement, postmodern Chinese literature that uses invisible ink and scripture on scrolls. I think that's what the new book is.
Yeah, they love the scrolls in the bathroom section. Do you know, I'm excited because I put it 22 months ago when I made the intro to the show. I said live from the Grand Library, and this is the first time that either of us have actually been in the library during the show.
Well, there you go. I'm literally in a big library. So today, instead of cricket, there are echoey big halls and some disgruntled-looking students giving me the look. Mm-hmm. So that's what today's atmosphere is. So
the good news is we don't get sued for lying about where we host the show in a library. And secondly, you didn't bring the crickets with you, right?
I'm afraid I left them in Italy.
Okay.
I was hoping that Alex was going to send over a packet from the US, but it hasn't arrived yet. I'm a bit...
The good news then is that this episode should be like Child's Play after the technical nightmare that was last month, which it came out okay in the edit, but it was a lot of work for us.
It was a lot of work and it was last minute. I think we only had a few hours until the end of June.
Yeah, it was the most difficult episode to do, but we got there. So I should just mention quickly, because schedule's all over the place at the minute. We're recording a few days early as well. Summer gets in the way. You were in Italy, and as you mentioned, our other co-hosts from Playboys, Alex and so on, everyone's traveling around. I'm just back from a week and a half in Spain myself, so everything's a little bit last minute. I even I spent 2 entire days just dancing on the beach to Spanish music. 14 and a half hours, dancing to Spanish music on the beach. I saw a whole load of bands that probably no one listening will ever have heard of. And then I went to this very fancy garden in Barcelona and I saw Kool and the Gang playing under a Juliet's balcony in a very lovely setup. And then I saw French singer Zaz, and I watched her car get mobbed by the fans, like paparazzi, taking photos through the window of her car, which I thought was a little bit disrespectful, but...
So it sounds like you had some literary adventures, some Woodhouseian adventures.
I did, and of course I told myself I'm not going to bring back any books, and then I brought back just 4 or 5, not too many, but just a few books that I got. The bookshops in Spain are fantastic, and the rereads I really love because you get them very cheaply. The new bookshops can be quite expensive in Spain, but I love it. I love to buy the books, and bring them home because they have great selection. They have more Dumas, for example, there than we have usually here.
Nice.
Wilkie Collins and all that. They have a really good selection. They love their classics. So I got a few. But look, I'm gonna start. I'm gonna tell you about the first book I read this month. I have it here. I'll show it to you. It's called Countdown to a Killing, by Tom Vaughan Macalay. Now, this book has only just come out this month in July, so it's brand new. So we're one of the first to get our hands on it. And the interesting thing about this book, PJ, is that the entire story is told in correspondence. So it's all WhatsApps and emails. Now, it's about 300 pages, but I read it in one day because it was so addictive, and the conversation style made me want to keep on, constantly reading. Yeah. So as I'm saying, the whole book, it's all WhatsApps and emails. There's no narrative at all. And I read all 300 pages in one day because it was so addictive.
Really?
Yeah. It's a brilliant concept, and it is a crime book, and the author is actually a solicitor himself. So he works, well, I don't know exactly what area of the law he works in, but he's produced this amazing detective novel, and it's called Countdown to a Killing because the idea is that there will be a murder later in the book, and they tell us that. Okay. And sometimes there are little editorial notes that say things like, guys, just bear with us. We promise there will be a murder. Just keep reading, and you're waiting for the murder. But what's spectacular is that you really get involved with the lives of the characters, and you kind of don't care if the murder ever comes because you're enjoying what you're reading.
And it must be very easy to read, and because we're used to WhatsApp messages and Facebook messages. So it's almost like almost more accessible for the younger generation, even for us.
It is, yeah. I mean, I think it's a fantastic idea. It's very, very novel. Yeah. I've not seen anything done like this before, And as I say, 300 pages, I read it in one day because it's just, it's very, very easy to get through. It's just an endless conversation,
Yeah. It does. It's very original. The closest thing I can think of is the Cell novel, which is quite big in East Asia. So it's basically a similar concept, novels through the format of text messages, or I'm not sure if they use WhatsApp messages, but that basically you're reading it from the phone, a new novel, and usually it's like a work in progress. Usually it's like Dickensian, like the new Dickens, writing the chapter every day, but sending it to your phone and so. But I like this format even better. I like it. Cool. Why not something else?
Yeah, and so the main chap is a guy called Lomax, and he's been off doing a secondment. So he's basically been off on holidays in Sicily working, but actually he's just kind of having a nice time, really. And then he has to come back to the office and kind of get back to reality. And his boss, Julian, doesn't like him. And, he gives him a bad performance review, even though he did a good job in Sicily, and kind of says, you do a good job, but you're cynical and you're not a company man. You make jokes about me. So give you a bad review and you don't get your bonus this year. And you think, well, this guy Julian's a bit of an ass, but then he's got a lot of stuff himself. He's trying to manage a team that doesn't have enough staff. The bosses aren't giving him resources. He's struggling with coming out as being gay to his dad. He's got a partner who's just an alcoholic and doesn't contribute anything to the to the rent or anything like that. So, and is actually quite abusive to him. So you actually think initially you think this guy's the bad guy, and then you realize no, he's not. He's just a complicated character, And even the main guy Lomax isn't that great. He is very cynical, and he is, not a yes man, which is a trait that I like, but he struggles with some kind of loneliness himself. He's not very personable. He's immediately kind of not nice to the new girl who starts and this kind of stuff. He's a bit of an anti-hero in some ways and doesn't really care about anyone, but he's obsessed with this girl he met in Sicily, who's this super bohemian girl, but she's also really, really just a very horrible, unpleasant person. And she's sometimes abusive to him as well, just mean and going around with other guys and calling him a loser and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
And just ignoring him for periods of time. And there's one nice character who's Wen Li, this new girl who starts. And and she starts in the office. And she initially doesn't like Lomax, but she gets to know him and gets to like him eventually, and actually falls in love with him. And
well, not too many spoilers.
Well, this is early page kind of stuff,
Okay,
but she's a very, very nice character, and I really, really enjoy what she brings, because she's supportive. She does get into a relationship that, with someone who cheats on her, but she's really good with Lomax, and I think that they have a good relationship together. So hold on a second. Now, PJ, I think we might be getting a call here.
Good Lord. Who's that?
Hello, you're through to Books Boys. You got both Dean and PJ on the line. Who's calling?
Hello, it's Tom Macalay here.
Tom, wow, what a coincidence. We were just chatting about Countdown to a Killing there. We have an endless series of these coincidences every month,
Crazy. Exactly on the right time. Exactly the right time.
That's every amazing, time, yeah.
Impressive.
Authors must all be telepathic. I don't know how they do it.
It's special connection, special book
instinct.
Well, thanks for joining us.
No problem. We're very pleased to join you, and I'd heard some complimentary things you said about the novel, so it was a great chance to talk to you guys about it. So thanks very much for having me.
That's right. I also submitted a little review. I read this in a day. Like I was just telling PJ there, genuinely, the way that it flows with the snippets of WhatsApps and emails just made it such that I couldn't put it down. It was just an endless conversation that I thought, well, I want to find out what, who says what next, and I couldn't. And you're building up to the murder, of course, as well. So you keep thinking, hey, we've got to keep going.
Yes, I think it's great to hear that. I think that the sort of the thrust towards the crime, it does keep one on one's toes. Although, of course, it's a bit tongue in cheek, and on one level, is a sort of not a pastiche of the crime fiction, but sort of is taking that slightly lightheartedly while exploring perhaps deeper issues.
Yeah, okay. There are. I was saying there as well. There's some issues with. So I was talking about the characters before you rang in, and of course, would it be safe to say that apart from maybe Wen Lee, who I think is a lovely person, Lomax and Julian, they have really good qualities and also some bad qualities. And I think that it's just a lot of characters struggling with essentially with aspects of normal life. And some of them have, maybe some loneliness issues and relationship issues and just trying to fight their way through existence almost.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. Because people were saying, some reviews were saying, oh, it's a cast of eccentric characters. And I said, well, actually, it is and it isn't. It is. But actually, that's because we are privy to their private messages and emails. And if you got an average bunch of people from the street or work, they're probably no more eccentric than the average person. And, and I think that the thing that does bind them all is indeed the loneliness. And they're all kind of hiding that in different ways. And it's interesting to say about Wen, because many people have said she's, clearly got oodles of kindness, etc. Although I always thought that, perhaps she was a little bit needy as well sometimes. And I think Lomax says that in an area. So she's, But you're absolutely right about the other characters. And I felt that, the structure of the novel really goes to show the different sides, because you're presented, for example, Julian as the sort of horrible boss with a mean name for him, the Rat Witch. And then little do you know that he's in the same room emailing his abusive partner and, is in this horrible toxic relationship. So, but it's good that it's interesting that you picked up on that loneliness thing, because I think that does pervade all the characters' lives, actually.
Yeah, and you're perfectly right about Julian. Initially, you don't like him until you find out a bit more about him and you realize, he's actually a very sympathetic character,
Yeah. Absolutely. He's some people have actually said to me that he's the favorite character because because the sort of, I think anybody who's, I'm not a boss, but I think anyone who's been a boss must feel frustrated that you've got these two people, Wen and Lomax, who are sort of demonizing him in some way, and yet they're actually not the ones doing much work. They've got limited responsibilities, and he's the one trying to keep the ship afloat and is having just as tough a time, if not far tougher than them. So apparently it came across quite sympathetically.
My favorite character is Wen's mum, even though we don't really see her. She doesn't do a lot in the novel, but it's just when you see the the little text, and when it's like, no, he doesn't want to read my poems from when I was a kid. You know, he can't even read Chinese. You know, it's like, no, stick to the recipe. Why have you made something different? Mom, please. I love it. It's very good.
It's nice to say that, because I think that people were saying it was interesting that the correspondence is one-sided from all the characters. But actually, I think that, well, obviously that's very deliberate, sort of conscious literary device, but also I think it does allow you to get your own impression of the characters who you never actually hear from directly. Whether that be the abusive Toby, Julian's partner, or Wen's mum, you can just see running around and stressing her out, sort of thing. Hopefully it brings them to that. And Katie, stuck in the law firm all night, just reading these endless emails from her sort of slightly lonely friend.
I couldn't figure out the dynamic there. So PJ, there's this friend Katie that Lomax has. He emails her every week. In theory once a week, but sometimes more. Sort of regular updates about his life, and then eventually she accidentally kind of forwards on a reply where she kind of isn't too kind to him, and they fall out for a while. But it's just his loneliness again coming out. He wants someone to talk to and to give little updates to.
Yeah, I just loved how Lomax's kind of view of the world is sort of wonderfully diverse from the reality, so he's sitting there in this small flat with a leaky roof, and he's writing these slightly grandiose emails to this friend of his who's clearly far more successful than him, and got a lot more going on in her life, and but he's really getting into his emails and sort of. And I thought that was important, that because not many people, or not, it's a certain type of person who writes those type of long emails. So I think it needed to be a wannabe writer who was, lost in his own dream of doing something special. And she just puts up with it. I think she kind of puts up with this. And as you say, she then finally cracks one night and says to her husband, "God, I've had this, this crap through from Lomax again." But unfortunately, she sends it to Lomax, which is quite painful to read.
But you mentioned the key detail there, so this might interest you, PJ, is that Lomax is a writer like yourself and like Tom. So initially he wants to write a kind of sequel to Agatha Christie's, and then there were none called, and earlier there were 10, kind of a backwards version, which he realizes, after some time is not going to work. So
yeah, and then he gets into this. I think he writes it, and the reviewer says to him, "Oh, that's really, really funny," and he's devastated because it wasn't meant to be funny.
Oh no!
So he then realizes that his latest mad idea is to actually, I'll make it really, really funny, and I'll make it as bad as it could be. So it's a sort of pastiche of a. So yeah, it's just he's constantly on the lookout for brilliant literary ideas and not really able to execute them very well.
Yeah, he seems to get progress eventually. Like, he's in touch with an old college professor or whatever who helped him with literature, and she gives him some tips. She's not always necessarily there for him when he needs her, but
no. And I thought there's that sort of thing that I deliberately tried to subtly bring in. Like, maybe he's driving this poor lady mad as well. That he keeps referring to her as Professor Nithicott because he's proud that he's got this backer, but actually, maybe sometimes she doesn't really reply for quite a while. So.
Yeah. But I like his view of the world. And I was sad when Julian said, you did all right at your job, but, you're cynical and you make jokes and you're not a company yes man. And I thought, good, promote this man.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It does sound like a very realistic book, to be honest. I mean, people writing WhatsApp messages, sometimes people writing loquacious emails and not getting answered. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's to do with self-esteem as well. And, it's that classic, he hasn't got any self-esteem in his job. Where he gains his self-esteem from is his big dream that, that one day he'll be out of here and doing his thing. And I think many people can relate to that who do any job.
Totally. It makes me think there are probably many novels in private WhatsApp conversations, because those are very long messages. Put them all together, edit it a bit, and you might have some very interesting insights into their lives, maybe even truer literature than what they might try to write artificially, feel like.
Yeah, that's why I chose this medium, actually, because I was like, it seems to be a really Well, one, it's kind of a very recent development, isn't it, for like humans generally, that we're putting down in messages stuff that wasn't really made for written correspondence, you know, like, so in the old days, if you said, oh, Tom's a real idiot, you would know that you were just saying that to let off steam and you didn't mean to state on the record. But then if I read your WhatsApp about me saying that would be very hurtful. And if you think about it, we're therefore all capable of having hurt virtually everyone close to us one time or another through a WhatsApp. And I thought that was I've always thought that's quite a scary development. And maybe future generations will think, what were we doing? Committing all this to sort of the written permanent word when actually we didn't mean most of it.
I mean, we produce more written material than any civilization in history. It's insane the amount of just data. 90% of which is mundane.
Mundane and just our thoughts and not our real opinion. And there's a sort of doomsday scenario that someone leaks all WhatsApps to everyone or something, and then everyone falls out with everyone they've ever known.
It also makes for both. I feel like it can make both for a raw story, and yet also cruder maybe as well, like crude and raw. So it's like a mixture of it could be a deeper real literature, or it could be a really superficial literature, and it feels like you're playing around with both of them.
Yes, so because Lomax is this creative person, he writes these long, wannabe beautiful descriptions of everything he's doing, and then meandering, and then you've got the British Chinese girl who's much more to the point with short and sharp WhatsApps, which sort of break up the rhythm somewhat, So.
Yes, she's very much just here's what's happening, and she's a sympathetic character. Even before what happens with her parents, she's sympathetic. Just she's taking on a new job. She's got some kind of her own kind of mental health issues and things like that. She does have the loneliness. She's willing to date a guy that cheated on her just because I think she doesn't want to be lonely, and Lomax doesn't seem to want her, and it's sad at times,
Yeah, I think I'm glad you picked that up, because there is a sort of element of not really darkness but sadness pervading some of these characters, and I think that the Wen and Lomax thing is exactly that he's got these self-esteem issues and doesn't really think that it would ever be a go with her because she's such an all-round fascinating person, and instead he's going after this really sort of odd character in another country. And
you've took me where I wanted. I'm going to ask you a question about her in a second.
Well, and then I was just going to say, and then Wen is clearly also got self-esteem issues, and is lonely and is going out with this, we all know the type, don't we? Some sort of young city guy who thinks he's top dog and actually isn't very nice, and she could do a lot better than him. Yeah.
So tell us about the girlfriend in Sicily, because a very interesting character, and maybe the only character that I don't like, she doesn't do anything that makes me like her the way maybe Julian does. The more you see about him, you think, oh, he's not a bad guy, really. She's just kind of not, she's mean. She's mean.
She's mean, and it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the obvious point about her is you don't get to hear her voice back.
Yeah.
And that was sort of deliberate, and in the postscript to the novel, without giving anything away, there's a sort of slightly jarring bit about, it is noted that Aurora made a serious allegation about Lomax, and that's what I wanted to do throughout. Just put this slight, I don't think there is any doubt because of the third party experiences of what happened there, but maybe there's this doubt that maybe it wasn't actually as straightforward as everything you've just read, and maybe Lomax was a bit, was not a dark character, but maybe not. And I think the interesting thing about her was that I thought it was important because there's a lot of positive female characters in the novel, and I thought there's nothing wrong with sort of having a balance there and having a sort of a female, not stereotypical female either, but a female type who perhaps isn't great, because I think that it is important to show the full round, and you don't want to have this situation where, Wen's clearly the nicest character, Katie's the most solid and successful, all the men are damaged, and I thought it was balancing to have the type of female character that is probably not as that common, but clearly does exist, and hopefully managed to delicately towards the end, give the impression that actually it's not just that she's unpleasant, but she may have real issues herself. So, but I just thought it fitted well with Lomax, because he needed to be sort of in love with someone who was so obviously on paper not a great person, but he was constantly in his quest to sort of have this happy ending to his life,
Even when he has a better option presenting itself to him, he sticks with like, no, I have to go back to this toxic girl, you know.
Well, as many artists are, he's romantic, right? In the sense of he's romanticizing someone who is not really what he expects.
Mm-hmm.
No, and it's distance, and it's it's based on a short, passionate experience abroad, and that sort of thing is so different from the sort of humans that we know on the basis of regular day-to-day correspondence. So you're right, he's that's exactly the word, he's deeply romanticized her, and it's sort of comical and slightly painful when he sort of gives the objective story of what happened that day, and the reader can clearly see, oh god, man, she get away, but he's sort of explaining that it was actually romantic or something, it's
And lastly, we should mention Fifi. PJ Fifi's this Italian. Well, he's a dwarf, and we also see a lot of problems with his family because his family have fallen out with him. They don't get on with him. Really, it seems that his height is one of the driving forces there. But he's just a lovely, lovely person. And he's very fiercely defending Lomax, his new friend. He attaches himself like super kind of, I want to hang out all the time and I'm here to defend you and all this kind of stuff, let me at him kind of Scrappy-Doo style almost, like, I'm sticking up for you. But he's a lovely, lovely guy. And you feel really bad for him when he reaches out to his family and they're just not interested,
Yeah, I think that was because obviously, with the drive that I fully support, about sort of inclusive writing. And I do think that people with restricted growth probably is a real area which hasn't been explored. And it's so easy to write about them and sort of be, to read about them and sort of it could have been comical or mean or something, and I thought, what about, inverting that and really giving him humanity and the sadness and respect. And actually in some ways he's the hero of the novel. And, and so it was quite interesting reading about that, and it's this sort of classic thing, isn't it, where it could be comical from Lomax's perspective in some ways on a superficial level, but if you think about it, you're like, but that's just as mean as any of the other stereotypes that we're addressing in the book, such as ethnicity or sexuality or whatever. So it deserves equal delicacy.
And Lomax isn't necessarily such a good friend back. He's not a terrible friend, but he's not. He doesn't really care.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the thing about Lomax. He's clearly good-hearted and is prepared to defend him, but equally is so wrapped up in himself that. And as you say, that's when people say, "Oh, Lomax is just this lovely character or lovable," it's like, well, he's very human. Like he's not perfect actually, and does tend to see everything from his own dramatic, overly dramatic view of what is a rather unremarkable life. But yeah.
I have one question for you because you're a solicitor and you wanted to write a crime novel. Was there any what prevented you? And thank goodness it did, because this novel's amazing. But was there any desire to be like, right, I'm going to do like a John Grisham style, just intricate legal thriller, or did you immediately say no, like that's not what I want to do?
No, it was funny. It was actually originally I was thinking more of it sort of the crime came about sort of later in the thought process actually. So it was more that I really wanted to write about these different characters and use use the form and particularly the idea of multiple stories playing out. And the crime sort of genre just appealed because with something like that, you really do need an impetus and a structure. Otherwise, you're going to get lost in all these people's stories without any narrative thrust. So I just find that the crime genre is great for giving impetus to the story. And as I say, it's tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time you are driven on to find out, well, what does actually happen here. But no, I've never so far written a thriller like that actually. But yeah, hopefully it still gives a bit of page turning focus.
It does. And so this has only just come out, so do you want to tell us, like, have you already got ideas for what's next, or take a break?
It took writing the novel didn't take as long as my first one, so it was kind of like one or 2 years on and off, and then it just took a while to get it published. It's as we probably all know, the the publishing world and agency world is quite slow, to say the least. And so that did take a while of false starts, or rather me focusing too much on a particular publisher and then, revising it. And so in the meantime was writing a third one, which is different, very different from this. So actually, that's a really nice thing about having a novel published, because you've got, you think that's just off my plate now. People can say what they want, but I'm not touching that again. And it's really nice to just revisit these drafts and it's almost like a blank page again, or even though it's quite developed. So yeah, the third one will be very different. Nice. Do you want to tell us real quick where we can go to get this one then? Do you want to give us a plug? Tell us where to get the book. Oh yeah, so it's in Waterstones. It's obviously Amazon's very easy to get. It's WH Smith seem to be stocking it as well, and I think lots of independent bookshops, I've been told, have got it. So, but Waterstones certainly would be the obvious one on the high street. Cool. I'll put a link in the show notes anyway, just to your site and things like that, so people can check it out. Well, PJ, do you have any other questions before I ask the usual final question?
Well, I do want to know, can you tell us briefly what inspired you to write the novel? Ultimately, was it looking at what's up culture, or was there a specific incident maybe that kind of triggered one point of the story?
Yeah, it was the first one of those, actually. So it really was kind of, if I'm going to write the second novel, how are we going to make it relevant? It was during the period where Netflix had really kicked off, and it was like, is the novel, which is still the discussion now, is how relevant is the novel? And then I thought, well, how do you write something which doesn't become, you don't want this, it's either a novel or it's this kind of very comic book type, colourful what's-ups, which would bore everyone. And it's like, how can you turn that into a realistic, but into a proper novel telling? And I used to enjoy history novels as well, like the old-fashioned ones. And so I thought, give it a go. And I thought, but it does have to have a character who likes to write, otherwise it would be very tedious to read, and the what's-ups are a very small percentage of the text.
Cool.
Yeah, very good. Well, our last question I asked everyone, I never let anyone prep for it, so I'm going to spring this one on you. But if there's any book that exists, essentially it's what's your favorite book, but not quite. If there's any book that exists that you wish you'd been the author of, what would it be?
Wow. Okay. So 100 Years of Solitude is obviously...
There you go, PJ. You love that one.
Sorry, I cut you off there by Derek Garcia Marquez for the listeners.
Right. I just find that novel... I read it at university, had to, and it's the only novel. It sounds really weird what I'm about to say, but I was going off to the exam, and I read the end again just before the exam. And there's a line when it says, and then the wind began. And I actually felt some wind. And I was like, Jesus, I mean, it's the way this guy writes. And again, it was, very intertextual. I would, unless, in case people haven't heard of it, I won't give it away. But the idea that you're reading a book that may be a book that someone else is writing within the novel, and it's self-referential and all that. I'd love all that.
Brilliant. Well,
I actually do mention it in almost every episode.
He mentions it a lot, and I've not read it yet.
One of my Desert Island books, and the same with you. When I read that ending, I was at a stormy beach, and I was out spoiling anything, but obviously it was a perfect place to read such an ending, and I felt many times throughout the books these different emotions and feelings, and I laughed out loud, and it's also comic and tragic. It's beautiful.
Yes,
wow. There we are then. Tom, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for calling in, and I absolutely love the book. So whenever I hear tell that the next one's out, I'll be sure to pick it up.
Oh, well, thanks very much, guys. Really enjoyed that chat.
Awesome. Thanks. Take care.
Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye. See you.
Well, there we go. Series of endless coincidences, but brilliant book. Countdown to it.
And I am delighted that he chose 100 Years of Solitude. So there you go, Dean.
You love it.
I know you're skeptical about your Latin American literature, but it is a quintessential novel, as I always say.
All right. Well, I'll take 2 minutes here before we move on, just to mention to everyone. So booksboys.com is our website. You can find links to their various things on there, including our Patreon. And you can just go directly to patreon.com/booksboys as well. And you can get the extra shows that we do. So this month, what's just come out, you're probably thinking these have been going on forever, but the final episode of Interviews from the Vault, episode 15, where I interviewed Danny Seraphine, the original drummer from the hit band Chicago. If you leave me now, you take away the biggest part of me. So I interviewed him for his solo album 9 years ago, and you can catch that on the last interviews from the vault. We also released this month some Playboys Extra, Luthés de Bohemia. With Mireia, we talked about the Del Valle Inclán play, Galician author. And
it's a great play.
Yeah. And we also did the Lorca play, The House of Bernarda Alba. So there's been a couple of episodes out this month. So basically what you can get on our Patreon is Playboys, where we review plays. A lot of Shakespeare's on there. I think 14 or 15 Shakespeare's, a couple of other things. Plus you got Film Fellows, Dark Place Dreamers, Caper Captains, and a whole mishmash of crazy things. So
we got 2 random Norwegian plays just for fun, just for the Norsk fan.
We do. We got a lot of stuff on there. We got some poetry pals, music men, games guys, So check it out, guys, on the Patreon, and you can get yourself a Books Boys t-shirt, and you can recommend books for us to read and all that kind of stuff. And then that helps us, and that means I can afford another trip to Spain. So it's
do that, and which would lead to further Instagram photos of Dean posing with books, and we all need that. The world needs that just as much as world peace, right?
Yeah, it's very, very important on the top. The UN meetings, they're saying we need more book photos from the Books Boys, so it's on there. So the other thing I will say as well is booksboys@hotmail.com if you want to get in contact with us. And of course you can do that, or you can also use social media. We have a comment from a Kyle McKay who says, just came across you guys. I'm trying to get back into reading more. You guys are really cool and really informative on the good books that are out there. So thank you, Kyle.
We appreciate your comments. And feel free to write anything, guys. Give us book recommendations. Send us your books as well, please, so we can read it and maybe even organize an interview if possible in our timetable.
That's it.
Feel free.
So, PJ, do you want to tell us what you've read this month?
Indeed. So what I've read is I've read Dino Buzzati. Now, do you know this chap, Dean?
Honestly, no. I can't say I've ever heard of him.
Okay, so Dino Buzzati is an Italian author who wrote mainly in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And he was famous at his time, but he has, even in Italy, lost a bit of popularity. The most famous thing he's maybe written also outside Italy is the famous Invasions of the Bears in Sicily, was become a children's film.
Is this book available in English, PJ?
Yes, so I have it for myself. So this time it is. He's, as I said, he was famous enough with his novel, The Tartar Step, his third novel, which was quite famous in the 40s. But anyway, this is a really important book. It's called La Boutique del Misterio. So basically the boutique shop of mystery.
Sure, of course.
Indeed. And I got this on my first day in Italy because I had read one of his short stories before, and I consciously seeked him out, just any book of his. And I'm glad I took this, because this is the best book to start with, because he purposely compiled his favorite 31 stories. I have the quote here. Let me just get the quote for you, Dean, here, so you can trust my authenticity. 1 second. He said, was a loose translation. He said, I lost it now, what he said. He said 31 stories put into order by Dino Buzzati with the hope of making the reader know his best selected works. So it's a good book to start off with, because it's a compilation of, I think, 3 books of short stories. He's written about 150 short stories. It's quite a lot.
Goodness me, wow.
And it's a delight, honestly. Every short story is memorable. Every short story has a very interesting philosophical theme. So he's from the existentialism era, but he's a lot more into the fantasy realm. He's a lot more into the Murakami vibe than Camus or Sartre would be, and a bit less into the do we exist vibe. He doesn't often question our own existence, but God, for example, often appears in the book almost like a sci-fi character who doesn't talk. Let me start off with one of his first short story, because it's in the first story selection he wrote. It's called The Seven Messengers. I Sette Messaggeri. Still one of his best known stories. This is basically about a prince who decides to explore the kingdom of his father, and who day by day goes distance themselves from the city and from the news of anyone, and this becomes rare and rare. Sorry, that was a very loose translation of the beginning, but that's basically how the story begins. And he has 7 messengers who he gives them alphabetical names. And what he does is he sends back the messengers to his hometown, home city. But the problem is, Dean, the more distance he makes from the city, and he thinks he's about to reach the border. He thinks, well, we're going to reach the border in a few weeks, lads. Don't worry about it. But no, it's just there seems to be no end to the kingdom. And every time he sends a messenger, the letter he gets back obviously becomes rarer and rarer, right, until like years pass by without hearing back from him. And he just describes like that the letters he receives back don't make sense to him. He can't. The emotions, they seem to be archaic. The language seems to be outdated. And it's a bit maybe extreme because only 8 years have passed, but it makes it sound like he's been going for centuries and centuries. And he kind of hopes that the weather he's experiencing, the birds he hears are the same, but it's kind of like an illusion because he feels like, well, this is not like my hometown and I feel like a stranger. So we got the theme of stranger. Now, this story was written about 1940s, so it is a very existential story. But still, big kind of fantasy element, I feel, because a lot of the landscapes he uses are very vague kind of fantasy. Is this even Earth kind of landscapes? So without getting into all the stories, obviously, I'll just mention my favorite ones. That is one of my favorite ones. From the same book is the story 7 Floors. Not 7 Messengers, 7 Floors. And this is an interesting concept. Yeah, I think this is one of the more interesting philosophical concepts of the book. It's kind of like about the philosophy of the institution of health. So do you think that if someone goes into a hospital, okay, but they call it more like a health house. So this guy's going into the hospital because he's got some kind of disease and he's here that in this place they can cure it easily. Yeah. And if you go to the 7th floor, the top floor, that's for people with hardly any illnesses, jolly people. They just feel slightly ill at ease. And the worse the illness becomes, the lower down you go. Mm-hmm. Okay. What happens is there's always an element of absurd more than existentialism, Dino Buzzati, by a series of more like bureaucratic mistakes and coincidences. He seems to go lower down every time. But this is an interesting point because the atmosphere is always slightly darker, slightly more pessimistic, slightly more sick-orientated. He also gets sicker. So do you think that makes sense, or do you think that's just fiction? Do you think like your environment, so the concept is the environment around where you stay in makes you the person you are, healthy or sick?
Yeah, I think that definitely.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting concept because he's not sick at all, but he does get sick and he gets infections the lower down he gets, and his morale really decreases. And the doctors become slightly more pessimistic. Mm-hmm. And,
the environment that you're in will play a massive part on things like that. Yeah, I think that's sounds like a very good concept.
Right, yeah. And it's a horror story. So again, it's really weird for the time, I find, because he's kind of a horror, science fiction, fantasy, existentialist, absurdist writer. So that's 7 Floors. And there's always an element of really black humor in it as well. There are stories here of aliens, of saints who live in a place where God is a lake.
Now, PJ, are there 7 aliens and 7 saints?
You would think so, but he kind of leaves it that he just does 2 stories. Sadly, I wish he had like 7. He's got a story, for example, of a drop of water terrorizing the flatmates because the drop of water is alive and it's going up the stairs rather than down the stairs. But the flatmates are embarrassed because they don't want to tell their neighbors because obviously that's just, they think they're crazy. So the drop of water is literally terrorizing one flatmate after the next. It's really weird because I would think that would be more of a David Cronenberg, more of an 80s concept, maybe. You know what I mean? Not something for the 40s and 50s. So that's Dino Buzzati. My favorite story of all is the longest one. It was 28 pages. It's called The Dog Who Saw God. It's the only story I mentioned more. It's basically it's playing around with, is this dog a god? Because this dog has been it's the dog of a hermit and he had been sending the hermit bread. Now, one day a big light appears in the forest where the hermit and the dog lives, and the hermit dies. And when the dog comes back, he seems to be very non-dog-esque. He seems to be looking into the souls of everyone living, judging people, and people begin to kind of believe that God is in the dog. Right. So this is a really immoral kind of village, and everyone becomes really Christian bit by force. It's like kind of a God-dog dictator. And that's what the story is about. Again, it was a horror element, a comic element. It's about this whole town being forced to Christianity just because there's a dog there who might be God.
Very, very interesting. So it sounds like these are good stories. I would like to maybe read something by Dino.
Yeah, have a look, as there are several different collections of different names of Dino Buzzati. I don't think any one of them is called literally the Mystery Boutique, but find his short stories, because they're very short. He's got one called 60 Stories, which are just short stories of 3 or 4 pages. And great stories, very kind of sci-fi existentialist. There's one about mice terrorizing mice taking over a house and terrorizing the family. There's the one that I mentioned was that saints, after they die, they kind of get to live in this holiday resort where God is a lake, and they're kind of neighbors, but one of them gets jealous because he doesn't get any letters from from people praying, because no one prays for him. He's kind of forgotten saint. So I love the concepts.
Well, I want to say two things. The first thing is the title, The Boutique of Mysteries. It made me think of the Mr. Ban cartoon, actually. I don't know if you remember the Mr. Ban cartoon. I thought he was going to go in, and just by magic, the shopkeeper appears, and then he takes him to like a mystical world in the dressing room of the shop. It's an old, 2D kind of cartoon from a long time ago, yeah. But the second thing is, PJ, there's one thing I'd really love to hear about. I don't know if you heard of the book called Discovery of Heaven. I feel like I don't have enough information about that book to date.
The Discovery of Heaven has been at last finished. And we'll move on to that now, because I don't want to mention it, because I believe it had over an hour and a half if we add the 2 episodes together of content.
Yeah, I think it's been a lot.
Look, all I can say is I've got one negative aspect to say about it. I was disappointed by the ending, which was a bit of a letdown, because I really loved the book. You know how I love the book. I went on and on about it. And I loved it so much I could hardly describe it. I was like a child before Christmas talking about it. Really a great book. I don't have much more to say than last time. But the ending, I feel like, did you have to write that ending? Very disappointing. Very, very kind of like a bit of a letdown. I was expecting more of a grandiose God is going to kick you in the, without using any swear words. But it was a bit more realistic, perhaps, than I would have liked.
Okay. Not a fan of the realism this time. Well, fair enough. At least you finished it,
At least I finished it. But again, highly recommend it, guys. It goes very religious in the end. It does go very into religious history, not religious per se, which I don't know how I feel about it. It was well done, but only if you're interested in that. So I have to kind of let people down a bit about the ending.
Oh, there we go. I'm going to play next. We got the following voicemail. I don't know if you've heard of this lady, PJ, Anne Wedgwood.
I believe I have.
So I'm going to play this.
Hi, Dean. Hi, PJ. How are you? If I know anything about you guys, you've got a nose stuck in a book, but I hope you'll bring it out long enough to hear a message from me. I remember that you enjoyed my book, The Botanist, last year, and I thought you might like to know that I brought out a new one. It's called The Soloist, and it's another murder mystery. It's another twist in the tale novel, so it's starring D.I. Ronnie Twist again, and it's set in the very wonderful town of Beverly. Yes. This one's a little bit different from the last one. It's not got an old lady as a protagonist, it's a young girl called Scarlett. The first line goes like this: I couldn't kill Max Salento, he was already dead. I hope that will hook you in. I hope you'd like to know who Max Salento is, why he was dead, and why Scarlett wanted to kill him. The whole thing is all about a race against time for Scarlett as she tries to find out who's actually killed this man before she gets arrested and put in jail. Anyway, I'll send you a copy over so you can have a look at it. Hope you enjoy it, and I'd love to hear what you think about it. Bye!
Wow. Bye to yourself,
man.
So there we go.
It's lovely hearing from you, and thanks very much. Yeah, you have it right there. It's a lovely cover, actually.
The Soloist, it's very nice. Yeah, and you see this little piano just there in the woods.
I like that. It's a bit more Murakamian, actually. That cover.
It is a little bit,
Yeah, I like it.
Well, so what can I say about this? I'm keeping on my crime theme from the last book, and this is another one. Again, it's about 250 pages, something like that. I think I read this one in 2 days. These are.
You're a fast reader. Yeah.
I'm a fast reader, but they're also addictive books.
Yeah. Totally.
And I took this one up to Hillsborough Forest Park, and I sat by the lake with the geese, and I read to the geese. So if you want to see, again, on our Instagram, if you want to see me trying to get the geese to read, you can find that.
I believe last time you tried to get the swans to read Wilkie Collins was even more challenging.
Yes, now they're fans.
This was more realistic.
I'm winning them over.
Good.
So this book, The Soloist, is, as Anne said, a race against time. So we have this girl, Scarlett, and I think she didn't have the most pleasant of childhood, some issues with her mum and this kind of thing. So she's sort of a vulnerable person, and she's doing care work. And eventually this lady says, look, I don't want, these carers coming in and out and different people, and, come and live with us. We'll pay you a salary and you can be my dedicated, live-in carer. Not even 24/7. You'll have your time off and things as well, but just someone regular to live in the house for Ada, this lady. And so she does it. So that's grand. And then this lady, Ada, says to her, one thing though, I would like to maybe make some provision for you in my will, because they develop a rapport and a relationship. But the condition of that is that when I get to the point where I start to lose my mind, you've got to kill me.
All right. Interesting concept.
And this girl's quite vulnerable and quite susceptible, and she agrees to do it. And they say, but we're going to inject some morphine in between I think it's between the toes, but they have a foolproof method to do it. Poison and then an air bubble, I think, between the toes. There's a system. But they say, look, we need to make sure it works. So we need to practice on Max Salento.
Oh, Lord.
And this poor girl, Scarlett, doesn't know Max Salento. She doesn't know why they need to kill him. She's just told he's a threat to the family. And that's it. She's got to go and do the murder. Now, most of what I've just told you, we discover a few chapters in, because the opening of the book is that she goes to kill Max, finds him, and he's already dead, as Anne said.
Wow.
So she can't really do the plan. But she's so afraid of Ada, not afraid of Ada, but afraid of disappointing Ada, that she doesn't want to tell her that it didn't work. So she just tells her that it all went to plan. As far as Ada knows, she did the murder. And then D.I. Ronnie Twist from the botanist shows up and says, look, someone's done this murder, what's going on? We know that Max was in the area. They track his, his phone or whatever, and he was near the house before the murders and things like that. And then they look at the cameras and they discover a woman going into the hotel, and there's 3 women in the house. There's the daughter, the mum, and not the old lady, but there's also Scarlett. So they're trying to figure out, well, who could it be?
All right.
Now, theoretically, it could have been just someone else, of course. And another woman appears, and that is the partner, the fiancé of Max. But then Max has been cheating, and who's he been cheating with, and all this kind of stuff. And then there's some secrets, because it turns out that Max teaches at the same school that the daughter in the house goes to. But interested in her or her friend, and then the parents are arguing and saying one of them went out for a walk the night of the murder, and all this kind of stuff. And then the son has a new girlfriend, and they wonder, well, is there any involvement? That one's a little bit more tentative, but could she have potentially been involved? So they try to increase what seems like maybe 2 or 3 suspects into actually potentially a few more.
Oh, okay. And it's got some characters from the botanist. So for those of you listening, we interviewed and Wedgwood about episode 7, was it maybe? Episode 6 or 7?
Something like that, 7 or 8 maybe. In around that.
7 or 8, perhaps, yeah. So it's the same universe with one recurring character or more recurring characters?
Really, it's only D.I. Ronnie Twist. I mean, she has a chap with her, but I honestly can't remember if it's the same one or not. Because Ronnie Twist is the main attraction here,
Yeah, and it sounded very Agatha Christie now, like in the sense of, well, who did it between there are more characters coming up bit by bit, and you expect that so the reader expects that it was a very plain kind of death, but it's not clear at all.
Yeah. And I mean, Anne's a big fan of Agatha Christie and that whole style, and she's always posting on her Instagram pictures of her books with Agatha Christie's books. She loves it. But I really enjoyed this one. I feel bad for Scarlett. You know, you do feel that she's being pressured into a situation. She starts to get curious. She gets together with a fiance, and they form a little team of investigators. She starts snooping around the house. They discover there are. I'm not going to go into what it is, but they do discover there are some secrets within.
And the botanist has an interesting format of going backwards into time, right? So the crime is being committed, just like in the second novel, and then we get to discover how.
Yes. Yeah. So the first novel, we're trying to discover. We know who did it. Whereas this time we don't. We know who didn't do it. Okay. That's interesting. Right. Okay.
So
it's a very good concept. And it's a very fun read. So for anyone that likes that style of book, your Agatha Christie styles, your murder mystery type things, I would say, go for it. And the reason it's called The Soloist is because the girl, I think it's Polly, she was going to do a performance with Max Salento, who she said she'd never met before, but he taught at her school. And so he's a pianist and she plays a cello, I think it is. And so they were going to go in and do a performance together, So that was that was this kind of backstory and the reason for the title of the book,
Hey, cool.
So I really, really recommend that one, and thank you so much, Anne, for getting in touch and for sending that one out to us.
Totally. It's lovely hearing from you, and good luck. And as I think you're probably already starting your next book. As far as I know you, so good luck with that or whatever it is you're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. And we love Ronnie Twist. What I like about her is she's never the main character. The books are never from her point of view or anything like that. But she's just this kind of good, tough cop that comes in, and then you start to get a little bit tense when she gets around.
Yeah. Well, Marple and Poirot, they aren't necessarily the main characters either, right? They usually aren't the main characters. So it's an interesting thing, these detectives or people just appear and...
Poirot sometimes is, but Miss Marple is almost never the main character. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool.
Welcome back to part 2 with the Dean and PJ, the Books Boys.
Woo! Whoa, baby! Now, what else have I read? So, I read, PJ, I've recommended before on the show, Biblioteca de los Muertos. The Library of the Dead by Glenn Cooper. No,
it is. To make clear, hold on, because I've been confused now. It is not a Spanish book, because you make it sound like a Spanish book.
So I feel bad for saying to you about books not being available in English. This is an English book, but it's very difficult to find in English.
What?
So it's by Glenn Cooper.
It's very big in Spain. Okay.
I don't know why, but initially I read the first book about a year ago in Spain. It was lent to me by Valerie the Pigeon Detective, and I read it and I loved it. And I recommended it on the show. And then I kind of forgot about it for a while, but I always had it in the back of my mind to look out for the sequel. I've never seen it in bookshops here in English.
Wow, okay.
But I looked in Spain. I didn't find it last time, but this time I did. And they've got a lot of his books, all in Spanish. So
wow, okay. Cool.
And I spoke actually to my Spanish teacher, and she said the same thing. I recommended it to her, and she couldn't find it in English, and she's got to get it in Spanish. And I don't know why.
Okay, that's strange. Okay, so this...
Yeah, it's just a curious thing. I don't have the copy to show you because I've given it to...
And I do need to know it now because... What's it called in English then? It's just called The Labyrinth of the Dead?
And so the first one, Biblioteca de los Muertos, is obviously the Library of the Dead.
Well, it's very funny to say obviously, as you kind of assume everyone speaks Spanish. Like the Library of the Dead. Okay.
I think we know what a biblioteca is now. Anyway, maybe not. Maybe I'm. We were accused on somewhere. I can't remember where of being possibly classist. So I don't want to.
Well, I'm not much better because I sometimes recommend books that haven't even been published in English. So yeah. Well, look, I can't even find the Library of the Dead. I get here like a novel by T.L. Huchu.
You see?
From Zimbabwe. So I don't know.
No,
so it's very hard to find this book.
The sequel that I've read is The Book of Souls, El Libro de las Almas. And I've just purchased the third one, so maybe next month we'll hear about that. I'm maybe going to start it like tonight, tomorrow.
Again,
anyway.
if I look up The Book of Souls, I just find Iron Maiden.
The Iron Maiden album from 2013 or so, yeah.
Okay, very hard to find these books, but anyway.
But you can find them in Spain. So guys, first learn Spanish. Go on vacation.
I can't find this chap. I'm like, are you sure this exists? Because I just find now James Oswald, The Book of Souls. It's very hard to find. Make sure to write the guy's name. I bet he's some Spanish guy with an English
He's
pseudonym.
from like New York or something. I don't know what's going on.
Okay. Well, look, Glenn, what's his name? Not Glenn Cooper.
Glenn Cooper, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Glenn Cooper. Mr. Glenn Cooper, if you hear this interview, please let us know why he's so popular in Latino America, Spain, and we'd love to know what's the connection there. So give us a shout.
And why you're so unpopular in English. But these are amazing books. Now, I will give the caveat that as always, the second book's not quite as good as the first one, but it's still pretty good. So, most sequels are never quite as good as the original. And this is a sequel, so it's Will Piper, the New York detective, FBI guy, retired now. He's retired now after the first novel.
Okay.
And if you remember, I need to give a little bit of backstory. So what this is in the first one, we see a lot of scenes in the present trying to catch a killer, and a lot of scenes linked to the past. And there's a bit with Churchill. There's a bit set way back in the 1300s and the 700s and all these different time periods. And in Vectis on the Isle of Wight near England, we actually have these like a kind of monastery or type place. And one of the chaps there, he's the seventh son of a seventh son. And he starts writing, and he just writes lists of names and the date they're going to be born or the date they're going to die. And he writes and writes and writes. And, if he writes your name in the book, you're going to die. And it's not Death Note. He's not causing it. He's just predicting, He's
just predicting it, okay.
It's almost like God speaking through him, and he's just writing what's going to happen. And he writes, and he starts to cover the whole world. Like, he could not possibly know, any of these people. He's writing in multiple languages. And then he essentially rapes a girl there and has a son. And the son just immediately starts writing. And they're writing together. Like, they're writing in tandem. Like, the lists join up when you kind of put them together. Like, they're not covering the same material or anything. It's done perfectly. And then they expand and expand. And this, they keep them in this kind of underground crypt, just writing, essentially. And they have all these books. So by the time of this sequel, that's all over with. But there was loads of these scribes, loads of them. And they just, essentially, the sad bit is they kept basically giving them local girls to violate and that, to reproduce, because they thought they were doing kind of God's work in a sense to create these books.
Right, so it's going very dark there, okay.
But these books cover from the 700s right up until the year 2027. So these guys wrote a massive amount of births and deaths right to the future. And then at the same time, all the books stop on, I think it's the 9th of February, 2027. And they all just write, end of the world. And all the scribes commit suicide.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, it's a fascinating concept, very dark, but
so, and this novel is set a few, more or less now, a year or two ago, whenever it was written. So it's end of the world's coming up, but it's not, it's not tomorrow or anything like that. No one's massively worried, and no one really knows about this because even though it was found in kind of British territory, or as it were, the FBI and CIA, the Yanks came and took it all away basically, and they said that this is our secret, and it's in Area 51, and no one is getting it. Okay, so. This chap, Will Piper, was involved, but he's retired. He wants out. But someone somewhere finds, in an antique dealer, one of the books. And then it says, well, one of them had always gone missing. Now, no one is sitting reading these books anymore. The FBI have got it all digitized. You can just search the dates and you'll find out who's going to be born and who's going to die. But there was always a gap. Well, there was a year that was missing, and now they find this book.
Right, okay.
And this guy Harry Spence pays thousands and thousands for it. No one can figure out why he's paying so much for the book. He knows he's in the 2027 club, and he kind of gets Will to help him. And Will's not massively keen, and his wife Nancy isn't very keen. But eventually they go along and help. and put the family at risk, actually, because the FBI want to stop this, and they will send people to, kill you and burn your house down, essentially, to get this book back.
Okay.
So it gets very dark and very violent in parts, I have to say. But this book has two flaws. Number one, not enough scenes set in the past compared to the first book. And number two, not the most feminist book, because we don't see a lot of Nancy. I like Nancy in the first book. In this book, she's just his wife. Okay. So they get together in the first book, but now she doesn't do a lot.
Okay, I get it.
So she was stronger before. But apart from that, it's a great book. And PJ, there's a few scenes that are set in the past in the second half of the book, and we meet some interesting characters. We meet a certain Guillermo Shakespeare.
Guillermo Shakespeare.
That's right. Our good friend William Shakespeare appears in the novel. There's also...
And he's actually translated as Guillermo, yeah?
No, he's... Okay, no. But there is a certain Juan Calvino.
Nice.
Calvin of Calvinism, Protestantism, and all that. Yeah. And there's also a little doctor chap who predicts the future.
Mr. Dr. Faustus?
No, but Nostradamus.
Nostradamus himself, of course.
So these guys appear in these flashback scenes, and there's clues relating to each one in this big old family house of the people who owned the book and gave it to auction. And it's been in their family for centuries because an old baron took it. And there's a sad scene where he takes it from this poor guy who was looking after it for the monastery. And they basically said, take this and, hide it. Because they burn all the rest. They tried it, they tried to lock them in, but this one guy kept one, And what happens is basically this baron comes in and says, you owe me some money. You can't, you owe me a product. I've paid for shoes or something like that. You can't pay it because your husband's sick in bed dying. But the baron doesn't care. So he says, if you can't get out of your deathbed and make my shoes, you're going to have to give me my money back. Or you can't, you spent your money on food for your family, then I'm going to take something of yours. What do you have that's valuable? And he starts plundering around the house. And they say, take my work tools. And they're the only thing valuable I have. And he says, well, your work tools are garbage to me. But he finds the book. And he says, I'm taking this book,
Oh, no.
So his family have now had the book for hundreds of years.
Right, okay. So it's like the history of how the book came to the hands of others.
There's a little bit of that. Yeah. But all around this big mansion they live in are hidden in candlestick holders and hidden in, behind bits of walls are clues and letters from, Calvin to his friends and things like that. And a new sonnet of Shakespeare, like undiscovered.
A new sonnet?
Or a poem or something anyway, like some new work of Shakespeare, like totally undiscovered. Turned out to be his earliest one or something like that, So a lot of really cool stuff is happening, But meanwhile, Will is just kind of like, his motivation is, we've got to get this book, give it to Harry Spence because he's dying and he wants to know, are my family going to be okay? Are they going to survive until at least 2027? So that's his motivation. And Will's motivation is, I just want to get out of this and stop like the FBI chasing me and people trying to kill me and, all this kind of stuff. These are some of the best books I've ever read. They're amazing, and the way they go through time and bring in all the fun characters and everything.
Yeah, I like that when one mixes historical figures.
And they pop up. You don't expect them,
Nice.
But what's really cool is the FBI can use this knowledge. Then they send someone into a fight, and knowing that he's going to die, and I know he's going to die because I've got it in the book, and they already know. They, so when they're chasing someone down, they already know how things are going to turn out because they know people's death dates.
Well, that has been done before by the Minority Reports, the Philip K. Dick short story.
Yeah, I mean that particular.
I'm not trying to criticize. Actually, I love the concept. I don't mind it being used before, but I did like it when I. Anyway, I always say I like Philip K. Dick because he's a great author, and he comes up with these strange ideas. So I like the sound of this novel because that does sound a bit like kind of clever sci-fi. I like it. Cool.
Yeah, and again, like I would say to everyone to read the first one, and then if you love it, try the second one. It's almost as good. But everything's all building up to a big disaster that's about to happen in the original home of Valerie the British Detective in Caracas in Venezuela.
And then the next book in the Keepers of the Library, right?
The next book should be the El Fin de las Escribas, the end of the
Okay. Well,
Right.
the English translation, they just say no, and the rest of the Anglophonic world is called The Keepers of the Library.
See, this is confusing. You know, this is Dumas style. All the books being released with different names and different volumes. Now you can't find anything.
And there seems to be a tale only in ebook between the two.
There's like a little short tale. I don't know if I'll read that or not. I'm assuming it's in like one chapter or something. And maybe I'll read it today. Yeah.
Of course.
If I can find it, you know.
It sounds good. The only information I just quickly saw there was that he's popular in Italy. So again, so this is a very strange job. He's very popular in Italy and Spain, supposedly. But all right, fair enough. I mean,
there's also some sad, Dickensian scenes when they're in school, Calvin and his friend, and they say to this chap who doesn't. They send him to school in French, Edgar, and he can't even speak French properly. And when he doesn't, conjugate his Latin verbs, the teacher just takes the cane and beats him till he's bleeding. All this kind of stuff. That's so it's a little bit of that, but
interesting they took Calvin. It's a strange.
It was an unusual choice, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I just find Calvinism as well. It's quite can be there, because they talk a lot about eternal damnation. So I'm wondering, does that lead up to the third part?
So the idea here is that we see the formation of these characters. We see how Calvin gets his idea of predestination because of the book. And we see how Shakespeare develops his writing, and we see how Nostradamus develops his prophesying. And a lot of it's related to this book.
I like it, yeah.
But these people have only ever seen the one book. There's thousands in this underground sealed up vault that tell the whole history of the whole world. But, only one ever made it out into civilization.
Wow. No, I do like the concept. And one wants to know what happens, of course.
Yeah.
You make a sound from the book. Cool, awesome.
Absolutely fantastic. So I really, really love those ones. So Book
and
of
again,
Souls,
everyone,
or listen to the Iron Maiden album, but it's not one of their better albums.
I don't think you should change the name. I think I like the way that you kind of stuck with a Spanish name up until now. Just keep it. So what's it called in Spanish? El Libro de los Muertos.
So the Biblioteca de los Muertos and El Libro de las Almas.
So the ultimate recommendation is, Dean, is get those books, but in Spanish, please.
If you can get them in Spanish, that would be preferable. PJ, it's just time to mention this month's sponsor. We are sponsored by the anachronomethod.gov.
Indeed.
And this is going to link to our next book in a moment. But guys, if you're writing a book and you think, goodness me, this is only 100 pages and, I wasn't planning on writing a novella, I really wanted a longer work. Go to the anachronomethod.gov and order one of their packages. You've got agricultural manuals, the one that Orwell chose in Coming Up for Air, the fishing manual.
Some religious
texts that you get in Shirley by one of Charlotte Bronte. The type of religion you get in some
but make sure to put the novella kind of in the middle. Don't make it too obvious. Like kind of in the middle or
exactly. The Dostoevsky, the Brothers Karamazov, religious discussions. It's all there. All these different methods. You choose the package that's right for you.
Oh yeah,
and it's the Anachrono method. So they'll give it to you pre-made. And you just slot in the little bits of your novel around it. And all of a sudden, you get an 800-page book,
And the critics will love it because it's simply long. No other reason. It's just straight long.
Yeah, right. The critics can't read 900 pages. They just say, oh, brilliant.
They're just amazing. How did do this?
So that links into the next book that I read, though, which we'll get to in a moment.
The sequel to Anachrono?
No,
it's the manual
it's very, very long. Leo, so I realized that I'd read a lot of modern books, and a lot of crime books, and a lot of really fun things, but I hadn't read anything from the 1800s, and I had a little panic.
Oh, that's shocking.
So I read something from the 1800s. It took me 2 full weeks, so long. Leopoldo Almas, Clarín, nicknamed Clarín, La Regenta. Universal classic.
Considered one of the quintessential.
Yeah, 900 pages.
Considered one of the quintessential Spanish novels, Clarín is in the realist school. So realism started later in Spain than in France or in England. And today, together with Benito Pérez-Galdós, who you've covered, Dean, he is considered one of the two main realist novelists, but only for that novel in his case.
By the way, at the end of the 900 pages, there's a 10-page short story. So if you read 900 pages and you think, goodness, it's just not enough, 900, I need more. Then just that extra 10, that's just the sweet spot.
That's the sweet spot. They didn't think it was long enough, yeah.
Exactly.
And to be honest, but all of his other stuff is really short, right? That's why
I've got a book of short stories of his there. Everything else he wrote is 100 pages or shorter, or maybe one of them hits 200.
Now, I did warn you, Dina. It's not the most popular. It's not the most people do tend to Galdós more.
Everyone I spoke to in Spain said, "Why on earth are you reading that? It's so boring."
And were they right?
Yes.
Oh no.
So it's very boring, and the strangest thing is it's 900 pages, and I've got so little to say about it. I've never. I mean, I felt bad that I was struggling with the Spanish last time with the Vargas Llosa, so that's why I read the Plague Trooper book, and that was grand. No issues there with the language. So then I thought, okay, let's really give myself a challenge. Clarín, La Regenta. The language isn't the problem.
Really?
It's just the fact that it's so boring. Nothing happens, and for pages and pages, it really uses the Anna Karenina method, just dragging it out, talking about nothing, just sections, just talking about religion and things like that. Really, really comes in a big way. And the poor girl Anna's sitting around reading, Confessions of St. Augustine for her hobby, just really
come on.
Boring stuff,
Oh Lord, okay. So, was there anything nice about it? What was positive about it?
No, nothing really. I'll tell you really. We've got this girl Anna. She is La Regenta, okay? She marries like an old magistrate or I guess regent, if you will. But they're in Vetusta, so this kind of ancient old antiquated town, right? The word means antiquated. And some of the side characters have Dickensian type names like Visitacion and Olvidito, like forgotten and this kind of stuff. So sometimes it's almost a Dickensian kind of naming convention with the side characters, where the name hints at something about the character's personality, which I like. That was the only good part.
Okay.
But nothing happens. I mean, she's got her husband, okay, Victor, and she also has two other people who like her. Don Fermin, who is her confessor. So basically it's her priest, and this guy Messia. But this is unheard of in this sleepy old town where nothing ever happens. They couldn't believe, there might be a love triangle, and then, whether or not she cheats later, I'm not going to reveal, but like even just the idea of it was shocking to this town of like upright citizens where nothing has ever happened.
In very conservative Spain,
Yeah, they could not believe it. And there's even a part where she wants to go out and he says like, what abominations, dances, theater, novels, like, goodness me, like,
novels.
What kind of world are we living in where people are, engaging in diversions and amusements? It's unheard of. So that's quite funny. My favorite part of the whole book is a quote near the end where they say, "It would be more noble to take a dagger to my veins than to wound me with the poisonous letters of a perfumed envelope."
I think you liked it because it does sound one of your songs.
Yeah, right. I gotta say, I should have written that myself, but he beat me to it by a few, 200 years. Clarín,
Oh, so essentially he wrote one of your songs and then built the Anna Karenina method.
Yeah.
But he's okay.
And there's a lot of, just people judging each other and saying like, these women who don't know how to, do anything other than wash babies, the women in this town, and just a lot of like gossiping and people hating each other for no real reason and small town stuff happening, but there's really very little plot. These two men like her, and then you wonder, well, is she having an affair with one of them or isn't she? But it's a lot of her sitting around and her husband being suspicious of her, and just they're talking and nothing really happens for the majority of it. It's just lots of religious bits. She's contemplating religion, and she's reading, as I say, confession.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Doesn't sound. You're not selling. You're not selling it. I'm afraid. You're not making me want to read it.
And the problem is, it's 900 pages. That's the problem.
Yeah. Okay, for only a short story, right? Anna Karenina, or a song. It's just a song.
Now and again, you think something's starting to happen, and for a couple of pages, it gets interesting, and I think, oh wow, okay, something's happening here. And then it's just, now let's talk about religion for 30 pages. It's like, you almost had me there. And I can't even remember any more details than that because it was a slog to get through. It almost ruined my holidays,
Oh Lord, okay. Well, I'm surprised. How can you put up with 900 pages of that?
And I swear everyone was like, that's so boring. Why are you reading that? Like, it's a classic. I thought I didn't need to read the classics,
Oh no.
But it has next to no plot. Like, it's just the love story, and some of the side characters are slightly humorous, of course, but there's an awful lot of just, well, will she date someone? I should say they hold her in admiration the whole time. like, oh my, it's Regenta. Like, we're so privileged to see her. She's beautiful and she's godly, and they refer to her as being almost a goddess and a princess, and even her husband does, and everyone worships this woman. She's just like queen of the town, she's just amazing. She's on the biggest pedestal possible, But the only real thing to take away from this book is the dagger in the perfumed envelope that I paraphrased there.
Or just one single line.
Yeah, but the writing style, like his writing is fine. It's just too long. So I'm gonna try maybe next month, the month after, some of his shorter works, some of his short stories.
Okay, give him a second chance. I don't think many people give him a second chance. It's very nice of you. Well, but anyway, it's a very
drastically different. So go ahead.
It is a very interesting movement, realism in Spain. It's just you chose maybe the most kind of tedious one out of all.
It's just so. The shorter books are so the length is so drastically different from 900 pages to 60 that I think it might be worth reading just to give them a second chance.
Okay,
but
that's very nice of you.
Yeah, well, there we go. We should mention, of course, that we're joined as always by Little Alfred. We've got the whole Books Boys gang, and
got the gang here.
We've got our TNC network that support us, and we're played on Radio Oxon. So hello to everyone in Oxfordshire, and check us out on social media and all the rest of it. PJ, should we quickly do our recommendations?
Indeed. So what I recommend is Geese, or The Wild Geese by Mori Ogai. It's a classic Japanese novel. What does it say about it? It's basically a love story, a taboo love story, which was popular around the time in Japan. And the whole goose scene is very relevant. It's about, I suppose it's a metaphor for sensuality, for richness. So this boy is in love with a girl who's kind of hidden away as a kind of a concubine, and he just in love with her, but he can never reach her. It's a very short novel, very sweet short novel, very well written. Give it a try. Mori Ogai, classic novel. Am I getting it wrong? But from the 19-teens or 1920s.
Okay.
Great stuff.
So about 100 years ago. Okay, cool.
Nice. What about yourself?
Well, I thought, I didn't read anything today. I took a day off. Like La Regenta broke me, and I took a day off reading. And I'm going to start something new tomorrow. But I have here my recommendation. I thought I'd just do something different. Sometimes you review children's literature, and I never really do. So I've gone for the ultimate children's literature for the little kids, the Dick and Dora books. These are the books that I read when I was like 3-4 years old. So technically, the first books I ever read.
Oh wow! Okay,
Dick and Dora and their pets, Nip and Fluff, and they're just like a series of tiny little picture books for kids with a few lines of story. But we get this kind of, it's set in the 50s. I did like little 50s happy little kids in middle class suburban kind of England. But we get these kinds of. I'll read a section of dialogue. Because this is what kids are doing on a daily basis.
Of course, yeah.
We will play, said Dick and Dora, presumably in unison. Dick runs and Dora hops. Dora hops on a line. So she's drawn a line on the ground. This is my line, said Dora. See, Dick, I am on my line. I can hop on my line, said Dora. It is fun to get on a line and hop. If my children talked like this, I would get an exorcist. Like, I don't know what...
Oh, no, it's okay.
Just this normal, everyday children's dialogue. It is fun to get on a line and hop.
It is very natural. I mean, this is what the kids are up to nowadays, right?
Yeah,
that's how they talk.
So that's my recommendation. And by the way, PJ, just before we wrap up the episode, one thing I wanted to mention was the series of books I was talking about, The Library of the Dead. They're making a TV show soon. So for anyone who can't find the books, there's going to be a show. So just keep a lookout for that, and you'll be able to get. Oh, hold on.
Oh, who's this?
I think it's very unusual to get 2 phone calls in one episode, but that's.
Come on here.
Hello, you're through to Books Boys. You got Dean and PJ. Who's calling?
Hi, is this Playboys or? Oh,
what?
Oh my God, it's Playboy Alex.
Oh
what?
No, I'm calling into the wrong thing.
You're in the wrong show, yeah. But don't worry, we can take you. How have you been?
I guess I have something. I got a couple books that I might have read, maybe.
That's a crazy coincidence.
Well, the timing is perfect. You caught us just before the end of the show, so you've timed it perfectly.
Oh, wonderful.
We can reschedule Playboys, but while you're here, why don't we hear what you've been reading?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I have recently read 1984. and also Three Musketeers.
Nice.
Wow, so you took recommendations from us, essentially, is what I'm hearing.
Well, it sounds like it was mostly you, Dean.
What?
I am still working on Narcissus and Goldman.
I recommended 9840 when we were living in Japan together, young Alex.
Oh, that's right. Actually, the version I read was the book you gave me.
And not just that, I gave Alex.
Okay. Then. I don't see the evidence for this. This is hearsay to me. You know?
No, he actually did give me
1984.
He gave me the copy, yeah, and that's the copy I read.
Okay, well, that's the copy you read. We've given him one recommendation each, then, PJ.
Nice.
So what happens is he tells us which was best, and the other person's off the show. No.
Okay, so it's the countdown.
Ooh, that's actually really hard. I'm not sure which one I could say is better.
Oh wow, you saved us there. You saved us. That's the real token of friendship.
Alex he's a very diplomatic playboy.
But yeah, PJ, I don't think we can kick Dean off his own show.
I don't think we can, no. I don't think so.
Does anyone else know how to record and edit?
Yes.
Well, you got a fair point. All right.
Well, Alex, so why don't you tell us about 1984 first, since that's the one that caused the controversy there?
Sure. So 1984 it was actually my first time reading it. I'd read Animal Farm in high school, but, not exactly the same thing. It's very interesting because the book is broken up into 3 parts. I don't know if we want to get into the third part too much, but the first part is kind of setting up the world. You got your main character, Winston, who he disagrees with the government he's in. It seems like authoritarian communist type of government where you have Big Brother looking over things. And there's like 2 minutes of hate where everyone will just yell at this one guy, Goldstein, and just trying, like, it's just propaganda. Just people being just brainwashed completely, and Winston just doesn't buy it. He wants it just gone.
Yeah, interesting though. The 2 minutes of hate, we still have that. Like, you can go nowadays to like these junkyards where you smash up cars to get out your aggression and things like that. Like, it's the same principle.
Well, it's more of a propaganda thing.
Exist. Well, a lot of the themes of 1984 exist. Big Brother. Or shall we say, Little Brothers exist now? Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Sure. And you have all the ministries. You got the Ministry of Love, which is in charge of war, and I mean, that's just spot on. Ministry of Truth is the one that the book focuses the most on, and that's the one that basically, they take the truth and then turn it into whatever propaganda they want to release to the public.
And so these misnomers are something that we see today as well. Like, I had 2 examples in my head yesterday, just by coincidence. I can only remember one of them now. So, for example, you want to cancel a service. You don't speak to cancellations. You speak to retentions. To keep you. And this happens. I can't remember what the second one was I was thinking of, but this permeates our culture now. These misnomers, designed to kind of. That's the other one. We used to get a sick note from our doctor. Now it's called a fit note to say that you're fit to work, but it's the opposite of what there's a lot of this misnomer designed to kind of play a mental trick on you and change the way you see things.
Yeah, that is a fair point that's a fair point. I mean, it happens all the time. Like, I see it in news, just twisting the story to whatever they want to say, and people aren't getting the real story anymore. So yeah, it's so on the nose. I mean, no matter what your like political beliefs and all that, they say that about the other side, no matter what. And yeah, it's a bit scary, but I do actually like the second part a lot because it's actually Winston kind of falling in love with this girl, Julia, and they both think that, Julia isn't as much in on it. She doesn't care as much about Goldstein and changing things. She just kind of wants to be in love with someone.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, she's less political than Winston.
Absolutely.
Well, she's a bit less concerned maybe than Winston, right?
But she does still join him on these like outings and even to visit basically their boss, O'Brien, later on. He supposedly is there to like give them the book that Goldstein wrote. And this is something that is completely banned. You will be vaporized if you read this or if you have this book. It's incredibly dangerous. And she joins him to like kind of revolt in a way.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because I recommended this, to yourself and, for example, to Robert, and I say, this is for me, this is one of the most important books that exist. I mean,
yeah.
Did you agree, or do you thought I was all right, but it's not?
I would say compared to Three Musketeers, this is much more important book. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas I like them both, this one it's very much a cautionary tale. Like Handmaid's Tale is one of those as well, and they happen all over. This one is especially about authoritarianism, as Dean and I have talked about before. What's very interesting, just one cool thing I've noticed or I found on the internet was that this book has been banned for two different reasons. One is for being anti-communism in Russia, but also being banned for being pro-communism in the United States.
Yeah, because I suppose we read it and we can assume this is some kind of totalitarian communist, but they never specifically say that. And you could look at it the other way.
Totally right.
Yeah, I mean, it could be entirely fascist.
I find that you mentioned Handmaid's Tale. So for me, it's Brave New World. I read that first and then 1984 straight afterwards. And Aldous Huxley, author from Brave New World, was George Orwell's teacher. And he really criticizes, I find, pre-fascist, very capitalist society from the very late 20s jazz era, whereas 1984 was written in 48, hence 84, switching the numbers around, or published at least in that year, and talks about just post Second World War and like the fear of, for me, it is a bit more the fear of potentially communism taking over. But I find The Handmaid's Tale is another great book to read because that's about male dominance and also religious.
Well, it's mostly about theocracy.
Exactly.
I've not read it. I've read Huxley, but I've not read Handmaid's Tale yet.
I find they're the three ultimate dystopian books that people can read and then form their own opinion. Yeah,
I would put Fahrenheit 451 in there. That was always my big three. Was Fahrenheit 1984 and Brave New World. But
I haven't read that one, so I have to read that as well.
So you like the book, and I suppose you gave us a brief overline. Are we going to talk about part 3, or are we going to just leave that to the?
So I think we can talk about it a little bit. I don't want to talk about maybe the last maybe a couple pages necessarily, but the reason that it's considered like anti-communist is to scare people. Sure. The reason it's considered pro-communist by some, it's more about the ending. But I don't want to get into it too much. However, Winston is betrayed by O'Brien. He was captured by what is essentially like the KGB there and tortured. And they're not exactly trying to vaporize him. They're not going to kill him, but they're trying to brainwash him into being like everyone else to fit into society normally.
Totally. That seems pretty tough to get through.
And that's the entire last third is just torture, basically.
Oh yeah, Room 101, a great concept because it's basically what's your ultimate fear, put it in a room, that's your torture.
So that is the final torture. The torture wasn't working, basically, or he was agreeing with them, but he wasn't going to betray Julia, and Julia wasn't going to betray him until you go into Room 101, where, they basically do betray each other.
Deepest fear, and I find that is a method used in it's used by many who are against terrorism or by terrorists themselves. It's used a lot, that method. So he's given some cool names. He's also given the concept of, there are 3 superpowers. One is your ally, one is your enemy. But then the politics, the government decides from one day to the next to switch it. And then all of a sudden, it's the old idea of 2 + 2 is 5. If everyone says it, then it's true. Everyone said, no, but they were my enemy yesterday, and my friend. Oh, yes, what are you talking about? It was always that way. If everyone says it, if social media pushes you, you believe that maybe there was something deeply wrong in your head.
Yeah, that's a core principle of the book, is just changing. Here are the facts today. Everyone's in agreement. And then tomorrow just saying, well, now we've changed that. And everyone is so brainwashed, essentially, that they're just like, it's always been this way, right? Like, and so tell me about Winston, because I noticed this in a lot of Orwell books, and there's usually one person who feels that the world isn't right. Everyone else just seems to go along with it. And in this case, it's literal, what essentially is brainwashing, mass propaganda. In other books, it's not. It's just people are living in the normal world. But there's always someone kind of thinks the world isn't right, and I don't know why, but we need to do something about it. And that's a character that I really, really empathize with it. So I like Winston.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't feel like he's supposed to be this really important person necessarily, right? He's just a person. Yeah. He's just everyman. So I can't say I felt much about him. I feel like he's that type of character that you're supposed to put yourself into his shoes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. He's not remarkable, but you're meant to... He's supposed to open the door for you to empathize and as you say, imagine yourself in that situation, really.
Exactly.
Totally is. So what do you think about Three Musketeers then?
Now, Three Musketeers, so Dean might be able to add a little bit about this one since this is one of his favorite books of all time. Three Musketeers is much more relaxing, I would say.
Yes.
I didn't feel sick when reading this one.
It's a very different kind of book.
Yeah. So I can't exactly place this. It's not my favorite of Dumas. I do still prefer Count of Monte Cristo there.
What? Dean's very upset.
I think because it feels a little more disjointed. So I really, really love like the first 100, 150 pages when you have D'Artagnan going to the city. He's meeting the other three Musketeers. So that would be Aramis, Athos, and Porthos. Mm-hmm. And they're both all three of them are really interesting characters. And the way they meet, the way they just they basically meet as enemies. And they end up having to go to duels against each other. And it's kind of funny just to see like, hey, I'm supposed to duel you? No, I'm supposed to duel him. He ends up in duels with all of them and somehow survives because other people try to attack. And he kind of saves them.
One thing I love about they duel, but they're very gentlemanly about it. And if someone's injured or something, they'll say, oh, no, we're not going to duel. You've got a sore arm. Let's give you a week or two to recover. We'll come back here and then we'll fight to the death,
That is one of my favorite scenes from it. I really, really enjoy it a lot.
Yeah.
And then after that, basically, they have a secret mission that they have to take care of. And they all go to London, basically, to give some information to the Duke. To get something from the Duke. And each of the three Musketeers is left along the way to deal with a fight or something. Mm-hmm. And I can't say I was too excited about it because I was wondering like, oh, where's this going to go? They're going to come back later in London and London's going to be where like the climax is. No, they come back all fine and it doesn't seem to go anywhere. It was a really big adventure for such a minor problem, just getting jewels from the Duke to give back to the Queen. And sure, it could have turned into something big. That's why I feel like it feels a little disjointed because then you have them going to war after that. And then you have the stuff with my lady after that. So it feels like kind of four different stories. Now I can see it like in maybe four different books where you'd have like a sequel. Or even like a TV show where you have this story first and then this story and then this story.
Yeah.
Where I think it could work much better. But as one whole book, it didn't entirely connect. Now, each story for the most part was really, really good. So if I were to just see them on their big adventure going to London, I would have probably had more fun. But then we come back and it's like, we're just going to go to war now. All right.
Okay.
I thought we just had something giant right before this.
I suppose that's the nature of this kind of picaresque novel where it is like, let's go do an adventure. Well, that's over suddenly. Let's go do another one,
Yeah, I guess I'm more used to it being one adventure.
Yeah. I mean, I get what you mean, actually, and I think that your point is very valid.
It's like Pickwick Papers, for example, from Dickens, where he did random adventures, and when I read that, it was like very enjoyable. But it's like short stories.
Yeah. I guess like when you watch a show that's like anthology series, that's kind of what you get.
Yeah. No, I should say the sequels are less like that.
Okay.
Well, the next sequel, sorry, is a bit less like that. It's more one story about the execution of Charles I. Then they go back to being like that because they get really long. Like the third book is split into 3 books. It's so long. So there's just a lot going on and it's all separate. So your problem returns. But
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely be willing to check out some of the others. And it was a very fun book. I really, really liked, I believe it was Athos. He just had a really interesting backstory. He was secretive at first. And Dumas really knew how to give you just a little at a time. Aramis was fun, and I think, Dean, you said this was your favorite just because of how suave and
So I get why you like Athos best, because he is very noble. He's the kind of almost the unofficial leader in the sense that they do look up to him and respect him in a kind of way,
And he gets arrested saying D'Artagnan needs more freedom than I do right now, so I'm just going to go to jail. Like, wow, that is the noblest thing you could have done.
I like Aramis because he's, I don't really like his religious story where he's trying to get into the church and things, but I like he is very suave and kind of he's well dressed and things like that. He gets all the ladies and he is very conniving. And I do go off him as the books go on because he increases that to the power of, to an infinite degree of sort of connivingness and really gets embroiled in the religious world as well. And then Porthos is just a big, giant who also likes to look good. He's a bit vain, but actually he's just, I'm going to smash things guy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I'm going to smash things and I'm going to drink and have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that D'Artagnan himself is a bit more layered than maybe the 3? Like the 3 of one main trait, whereas D'Artagnan is a character?
I would still say Athos is probably deeper than D'Artagnan because Athos, he is noble, but he's also has a past that we know a lot about. We know that he was married and he basically killed the woman that he was married to because she was sent to be executed. And I feel like that gives him a lot more depth.
Yeah,
D'Artagnan at the beginning doesn't really have a lot of depth, so he got me a little less interested than Athos.
Whenever there's a tragedy, I find in the backstory, it immediately makes it more dimensional, the character, right? Because, something about the past and you can relate to what happened in between. It kind of fills in a lot of lines, I feel like.
It feels like there's a lot more there to look at. Now, D'Artagnan, he didn't have so much of an interesting past. He got some money from his father. His father was a musketeer, and he liked to fight a lot. So at the beginning, it's like, all right, where's this going to go? He's a bit naive, like in a video game, he'd be like the level 1 warrior who then grows up into like a level 50 by the end. Right.
And I'll tell you something about D'Artagnan. The more you follow through this, he levels up to ridiculous degrees. And I'm not going to give any spoiler because the series of books, they all appear, but he's the centerpiece of the series. And we've reviewed a few of them before, but he gets to great heights and he always becomes Athos. He becomes this highly respected old veteran kind of guy. So that's a really good bit about him, and you get to see him develop from this young country lad.
Yeah, exactly. You do see development. What was that, PJ?
No, I just said that's interesting that it's you can really see the character develop throughout different novels and into different. You told me a bit, Dean, like into very different kind of professions and social classes. So. Right, because a terrible thing would be like to keep the character stuck in one place, like some authors would do, and that's just unnatural, isn't it, as well, and just boring as well.
Yeah,
he definitely changes along the way. I mean, there's some things I like that he does, but then there's other things I don't like. Like he really took advantage of Kitty, and that kind of sat the wrong way with me. But I do think that the ending is absolutely fantastic. I really like how it went. It did slow down a bit. So you have my lady who's basically imprisoned by her brother-in-law.
Oh.
And
don't tell the ending. Oh,
yeah,
you doing
no,
it?
it's not the ending. It's not the ending. And no, this is before the ending. And in this time, it really slows to a crawl. She's in prison for probably 50 to 75 pages. And that's not a lot necessarily, but each
compared to Monte Cristo,
they go through, each chapter feels a lot of the same. And she's kind of a one-note character. She's conniving, and that's kind of all I really got from her.
Mm-hmm. I think that everything you've said is fair. Absolutely. I think so. But yeah, the reason I recommend it is just because you liked Monte Cristo, and I thought, well, same author. And this one's my favorite, but again, it's maybe because I read it first. This sat on my shelf for about 6 years, and I thought, what's this old, stuffy French book? I'm not going to read that. And then one day I just thought, there's nothing else available, I'll read it. And I just thought, oh my God, this is the best thing I've read in my life. And I wasn't expecting this young country lad to end up meeting the king and everything like that,
Is it really one of your favorite books ever?
Yeah, it definitely is. It would probably be in one of my top 5 of all time or something. It's fantastic. Yeah.
But then Monte Cristo is your favorite book, Alex, right? So it's your number one favorite.
Yes. And so maybe that's also part of it. I might have been expecting more like Monte Cristo and
disappointed a bit, I suppose, right? After
not exactly. I don't think I was disappointed. I certainly had problems with some areas, but I'd still say I'd grade it an A. It's still a really, really good book. There's a lot of good things to talk about.
I'll tell you one thing, because Monte Cristo is an incredibly long book. I think that, and this is much, much shorter, I think that to make a fair comparison, not that I'm saying, you have to go away and do this, but to make a really fair comparison, you'd want to read the sequels as well. So they're a comparable length, and then you see the same level of progression that you see in
see it as one book.
Well, anyway, look, it's good that you like them both. Very different kinds of books. Anyway, and thanks for calling in. Do you have anything else you want to say about them, or?
I do want to add one more thing. So we were talking about Brave New World and all these others similar to 1984. One I heard about, but I have not watched. It's a movie called Dino on the Moon. It's a Russian movie, but this is more about capitalism. And some of the fears about capitalism and how people are taken advantage of. So you can kind of get a range from what we've talked about, Handmaid's Tale, about theocracy and like authoritarianism in 1984. This one would be capitalism.
Indeed. One of the first dystopian proverb books was the Russian novel We, which came out maybe 8 years or 9 years before Brave New World. So I'd also love to read that myself. This film also sounds good.
I'm a very vocal critic of capitalism, so this sounds good.
Yeah, thanks. That really sounds good to me too. I'd love to read it.
Yeah, I think Nikolai Nosov is his name. The one who did this? Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, thanks.
Well, sounds good. Thank you very much. And I think that is the end of the show. So thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back as always next month.
Thanks for calling, Alex, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks for having me.
Get on booksboys.com and click buttons and do things. Send us your feedback via smoke signals and carrier pigeons. And we're going to end.
Give us the feedback if you missed the grasshoppers, or perhaps you missed the sheep from a few months ago. Any other requests you want? Maybe
we need more animals in the background. Yeah,
maybe I can juggle something. I don't know. Like, just give some crazy requests.
This show felt like child's play after the difficulties we had last month. This was so easy to record, so I love that. We're going to end, I think, this month with my newest song, which actually is 3 or 4 months old now. It just took me a while to get around to it, using it. So I'm going to play my latest song, which is called When the World Comes Crashing Down. And if the DJ would spin that record.
It's fitting for the dystopian theme.
And we'll be back in about a month.
See ya.
It's hard to accept you did not come, 'cause I've waited for you oh so long, but the love in your heart has now gone, and I'm still convinced you were the one. And when the world comes crashing down, I can't accept you'll no longer be around. I need your voice, I don't hear a sound. My heart is bleeding, dripping on the ground. And whoa, after you've gone, whoa, whoa, the world is a sad song. Whoa, you were my goddess, my Aphrodite. Flame within me, you ignited. Now there's no Venus inside, and my heart burns from deep inside. Baby, baby, I want you back. You're the only one, and that's a fact. When did our bond begin to crack? Once it was over, there was no turning back. I said, whoa, after you've gone. Whoa, whoa, the world is a sad song. Whoa. And you know that I still love you, and I dream of you every night. You still reside in my heart, baby. For love, I'm prepared to fight. I thought I could live in a work of art. You were the one to whom I gave my heart. I gave you my heart, girl. I'm so sorry that we had to part. And now we're both back at the start. I said it's whoa, after you've gone. Whoa, whoa, the world is a sad song. Whoa, I said it's whoa, after you've gone, then it's whoa, 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 the world is a sad song. Whoa.
Books Boys was presented by The Dean and PJ Burke in association with Thaddeus Penguin Productions. This episode was brought to you by our sponsor, the Anna Karenina Method. If you would like to get in touch, you can email us at booksboys@hotmail.com or visit us at booksboys.com. The intro uses Driving in the 70s from the Of Soundtracks and Garage Bands EP by Trapdoor. And the outro uses Dog's Light by Bravo Max from the album of the same name. All music used is either podsafe or used with permission. If you'd like to support the show, go to patreon.com/booksboys, get the show early and all of our bonus Spoof Fan the Boys shows. And you can also check out our music on Spotify or Apple Music. Thank you kindly for listening to us. Please tell your friends, and come back next time for another episode of Books Boys. Read some books!